Hey guys, I'm Andrew Jensen, your friendly neighborhood realtor, and I wanted to make a video today specifically looking at buyers. So if you're a buyer out there, this video is for you. Specifically right now at the beginning of 2022, what I wanted to talk about was the importance of using a realtor when you are a buyer. So having representation when you're a buyer. And I think it's important because right now we're going to be going into a time where we're going to see rates increase from the Bank of Canada. So getting and securing that mortgage is going to be a little bit trickier going forward. So I expect to see a few more buyers jumping into the market now versus when that rate increase happens, which is very likely going to be in the spring. So I wanted to talk about a few things that make having a realtor represent you as a buyer worthwhile. So let's jump into it. One of the biggest reasons why using a realtor is important when you're a buyer is that a realtor is gonna know the price or the general value of a property pretty much the instant they walk in the door. Like a good realtor is just gonna know the neighborhood, gonna know the type of house that you're in, gonna know what the value is, so that when you're looking at buying a property and you're seeing a listing price, you can know whether that's a fair or accurate representation of the actual value of the property by having that realtor there to give you that expert opinion. The other important thing that realtors can do is provide comparative market assessments. So that's a CMA. I've talked about those before on the channel, but essentially what it is we take a look at all of the homes that are selling in the area for how much money, and we use that to determine whether or not the subject property or the property that you might be interested as a buyer is truly valued appropriately. So not only do we keep our general knowledge and our experience of a neighborhood and of knowing real estate on hand to help us figure out the value of a property, but we also can use the actual data from around to come up with a proper comparison to what this subject property is versus other properties that have sold in the area within the last, I usually do about a 6 month back. The other thing too is just logistics of setting up showings can be really frustrating. Trying to lock down a time to go see XYZ properties and making sure that you're not just running from one side of town to the other side of town, from the other side of town, to go and look at a bunch of properties. That's why using a realtor is helpful, because we can help you to just maintain the schedule of going and seeing all the homes properly, have it all lined up so that you go see them in a nice order, and it makes it a lot easier for you so that you can just focus on taking a look at the properties, enjoying them, and getting a proper idea of what that property is, rather than trying to figure out, okay, we gotta get to this next one before X amount of time, and then we gotta go to the other side of town, we gotta make sure we're there by X amount of time. So having a realtor there makes a big difference when just organizing showings for you guys. Another thing that's really important to remember when you're thinking about using a realtor as a buyer, remember that realtors operate under sort of a code of ethics. We're actually kept under a very strict code. We call it the Real Estate Act here in Alberta and in Canada. And essentially the Real Estate Act makes sure that realtors are operating under a certain parameter of ethical practices. And so that means that you're gonna get a realtor who is gonna be operating and is gonna be representing you to the absolute most best of their ability. We call it fiduciary duties. Essentially, it just means we're completely loyal to you when we are working with you. And that means that we will be able to help you through a contract, help you through a deal the whole time while maintaining complete loyalty to you. There's actually pretty stiff penalties, and we can get completely removed from our license of being a realtor if we end up breaking that code of ethics or doing something that would be against the Real Estate Act. So there's that sort of standard that real estate agents and realtors have to live up to, and that's something that can give you confidence as a buyer. Okay, another big thing is realtors are in and out of houses all the time, and one thing that we do is every time we help a buyer buy a property, we go through an inspection with that buyer. And so after a certain amount of time in the business, you actually start to get very good at recognizing what's going to be a red flag even before the inspection happens. And so that can save you a lot of money, because an inspector, at least here in Alberta, is usually around $500 to get the inspector to come in, do the inspection, and send you the report. And so one thing that a realtor can do is be able to recognize some of those telltale signs that there could be really big underlying problems here that you might not be able to recognize just because you don't have as much experience going in and out of homes like a realtor does. We're talking about inspections. We know a lot of inspectors, so we can recommend inspectors, we can recommend lawyers, we can even recommend mortgage brokers. And I mentioned before that code of ethics. That code of ethics also makes it so that we don't get a kickback from those recommendations, right? So anytime that we suggest a lawyer or suggest a range of lawyers or a range of inspectors that you can choose from, we don't ever get any kind of kickback from that sort of thing. So you can know that our recommendations come from a genuine sense of these are good companies that you can trust. Oh, and I should mention, while we're talking about inspections and inspection reports, it's really good to have a realtor there to sort of talk you through the inspection report, because it's a very long document and there's a ton of things to go through. And it's always like, what's something that I should genuinely be concerned about and what's something that I shouldn't? And so a realtor is going to help you as a buyer to look at that inspection report and be able to digest it and see what sort of things are a non-issue and see what sort of things are something that you should be worried about. Another really good thing that happens when you start using a realtor when you're a buyer is we set you up on a search. So we pick out your perfect parameters, your perfect filters, because there's a lot of homes on the market at any given time, and we can use those filters and those parameters to create a search for you in any kind of area. So it can be certain neighborhoods, or it can just be a certain chunk of the city in general. But we can use that to make a search for you, which is really nice because you'll get an update as soon as something new hits the market. So the instant a new property comes onto the market, you will know about it. But what's really interesting too is that nowadays there's so much competition, and lately there's been less homes going on the market, but more buyers on the market, that homes have been going really quickly. And you might see a home that goes onto the market and it has an offer within literally minutes. And so one other good reason why you might want to use a realtor as you're thinking of buying a property is the realtors also have connections to homes that are not on the market yet. So pre-MLS homes. And that's really nice because we have colleagues and we have friends that are within the business, and we have past clients that might be thinking of listing their homes, and we can let our buyers know about those listings before they become available to the public in general. So that makes a really big difference when the market is moving so quickly. This next one that I actually didn't realize this was a thing until I actually looked it up, and it's called the purple room effect. Basically, using a realtor is better than just using a website or something like that because of the purple room effect. Basically, a realtor is going to be able to know their neighborhoods and know what you're looking for so well that we'll be able to find you a home that has a purple room specifically. Right? And that's something that you could never find on a website or use a website to help you locate. And so having a realtor is really good for just getting those little tiny details figured out, because sometimes it's a make or a break whether or not a home has a porch with 2 levels or not, right? So having a realtor around will help you to be able to find those listings way easier than if you were just trying to use a website or a computer to do it. So for me personally, my kind of specialty is knowing what kind of backyards you really like. And so because we have a dog and we enjoy having our dog running around the backyard, and I grew up on an acreage where we had tons of room, I love finding my clients those backyards that are kind of awesome and special. And so for me, I can bring that to the table with my clients. It's like, yeah, I know exactly what kind of yard you're looking for. It's got to be able to fit a trampoline, and it's got to have privacy, and you're looking for these kinds of fruit trees or whatever, right? So having a realtor there can help you to lock down those little tiny details that are kind of impossible to filter for on your own on a website. So the next one is navigating the paperwork. Oh my gosh. When I first started real estate, I couldn't believe these contracts that we have to go through and that we're kind of working on and explaining to clients, and just what it's like lawyer talk. It's like an official written document that holds up in court. Like, it has to be written in a specific way. And so being able to navigate those contracts with our clients. So as a buyer, you're going to go through a few different contracts, which might be exclusivity agreements, which would be offers to purchase, amendments, addendums, being able to recognize when to use which documents so that when you go to purchase a home, you're using the right paperwork, and you're using the right kind of paperwork that's going to save you in the long run, just so that you don't mess up anything. Because you can completely flip a deal upside down if for whatever reason you didn't put in the right wording or you didn't put in the right details in a certain specific piece of paperwork. And then all of a sudden closing comes and you're stuck with, we didn't, explain this right, or maybe we missed like a zero. I've seen an offer come into me on one of my properties, and it was like 200 grand less than what the asking price was. And they had put in, instead of putting a 3, they they put in a 3 instead of putting in a 5 as far as 500,000, 300,000. And so it was kind of like, are you sure you really mean this? So having a good realtor there to catch those kinds of mistakes or to just help you through the paperwork makes a big difference. Somebody's honking outside. Next really important one is negotiations. Man, negotiations are so much fun, at least for me. It's probably my favorite part of being a realtor, is getting to the point where you've found your home and you've got your buyers all excited and they're ready to purchase this home, and then we start to negotiate, right? And the negotiations are really important because it's a dance. I mean, you may have heard this before, but it's really a back and forth trying to figure out like where their limits are as far as what they will accept and where our limits are and what we will accept. And it's a really fun process. For me, it is anyways. And so having a good realtor there to help you as a buyer is going to make a big difference as far as what you can negotiate the prices down to, because we understand what's appropriate and what's not. Because I've had clients that say, okay, we're good, like that's enough negotiation. And I've been able to tell them, actually, no, I think we've got at least $3,000 or $4,000 of negotiation that we can still get them to move to. And it's totally worked out. And it happens quite regularly. But you don't know that, you don't quite have the instinct for that if you're not doing it quite regularly. So that's why having a good realtor can make a big difference. And I looked at what kind of the statistics were as far as like how much having a realtor representing you as a buyer can save you on buying a home. It's usually about 3%. That's the average. And so what that turns into is anywhere from $3,500 all the way up to $100,000 that you can save just by utilizing a realtor as you're buying. And the great news is you don't have to pay for the realtor services. The seller agent and that all kind of comes from the seller side as far as like commissions and that kind of thing. So really, really nice to have a realtor involved because you will save money on average every single time. And like I said, average is about 3%. So that's quite a lot. And then there's another side of things too, where it's emotionally stressful to be in a negotiation. And sometimes you just want to like yell at another, at a seller that it's like, why are you getting so hung up on this? Like all I was saying is that like, I want the freezer moved to this side of the room or whatever, right? Like those kinds of things can really, really get emotionally heated. So having a realtor there to help you just sort of calm down, take a look at what's going on, and to just walk you through that process that can be very stressful makes a big difference. So a little bit like the inspection side of things, there's another side of owning a home, which is having the right permits and making sure that your home isn't necessarily like your property is not necessarily encroaching on maybe your neighbor's property. So this all comes to form in what's called an RPR, a real property report. And we require one for each property that I buy with my clients. We require an up-to-date RPR. And so an RPR really gives us an idea of what's going on as far as the home itself and whether or not there are permits in place that will help the closing to happen smoothly. So it might be something as simple as like, if the deck is too high, you need to have handrails. And so as a buyer, you might not recognize that that's there. And so when you purchase the property, you might find that your deck that you just purchased isn't compliant with the city. And you have to go and get that done, and you'll have to go get that worked up. And I've had opportunities where I'm helping my buyers buy a property and we recognize from the RPR that the deck, this happens, that the deck was too high and needed handrails. And so that was a requirement that we put into our negotiation, was that like we need to have those handrails done and installed, and we need to have a compliant RPR with a certificate of compliance from the city of Edmonton to make sure that that was done properly and according to code. So having a realtor help you with that as a buyer makes a big difference, because who thinks about RPRs? I think most people don't even recognize what that is unless you've bought or sold homes before. So it makes a big difference. I think the last thing that makes a big difference using a realtor as a buyer is just getting the closing done smoothly, right? You've gone through the negotiations, you've gone through finding the home, you've gone through all the effort to fall in love with it, and you finally got the price and you're all agreed. Making sure that the closing happens smoothly is really important, because you don't want to have any hiccups at the last second. So for example, like perhaps on title, the person who is representing the sale of the home, or that client who's selling the home, they might not actually be on title. Or maybe there's a spouse on title, but that spouse no longer lives there, and there are complications that come in whether or not they actually have the right to sell that property without the spouse's approval or without the spouse's input, right? I've had situations where a seller has approached me to say, hey, I need to sell this house, can you sell it for me? And I've taken a look at the title, so you have to pull the title, and you can get that online. You pull their title, and then you take a look at like, who is on title, and you take a look at what the mortgage might be remaining, that sort of thing. And there's been a few times where I've said, you actually can't sell this house because you have too much mortgage remaining, or you will be upside down. And so all of a sudden, they can't sell it. And so having a realtor represent you as a buyer, you might be able to avoid situations where that seller did sort of squeak through and get their listing on the MLS, and they actually didn't have the right, or they weren't able to properly sell it. And so you've wasted all this time, including getting the inspection done, working with your lawyer, getting your finances in order, and then all of a sudden you find out, whoops, the sellers can't actually follow through with selling the home. So it has happened before. The other thing too is just the conveyancing to your lawyer. Myself, we take care of that completely, and it's really smooth process. Everything is digital and it goes straight over to your lawyers, and that way when it comes to closing day, everything transfers quickly, the funds are moved, and there's no problems, no hiccups. Everything is all done automatically on our side of things. And that makes a big difference too for a seller, just having that convenience of knowing that it's in good hands and that the process is going to work through smoothly. Guys, I think that's about it. 10 different ways that using a realtor as a buyer is really important and is gonna help you in the long run. I hope you enjoyed the video. I always love making these. If you did like it, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and there is a notification bell that you can use to get updated whenever I make a new video, which is usually about, once a week, or maybe, depends. I have a new baby, so things are a little bit crazy around here, but I always love making these for you guys, and I appreciate you watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye.